Frank Gaffney joins me now, founder and president of the Center for Security Policy. And Frank, we've got so many things to talk about today. First of all, let's start with the launch today by North Korea of yet another intercontinental ballistic missile. What does this tell us?
It tells us that what we have tried to delude ourselves into believing for a long time, Lars, which is that we could dissuade the North Koreans from posing a mortal threat to our country by giving them money or giving them food or giving them political concessions or other accommodations, or for that matter, that we could persuade the Chinese to help us dissuade them from proceeding down this path, have been abject failures. Those policies, whether pursued by Republicans like George W. Bush or Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and others, have, as predicted,
Frank, you
now are reaping the whirlwind.
You kind of disappeared for a moment on me, but you said we're reaping the whirlwind because North Korea can keep carrying out more and more powerful launches of missiles, and there doesn't seem to be anything we can do to get them to stop that. So what's the next step for President Trump?
Well, I think the next step, Lars, is that we have to begin shooting these missiles down. And I believe that the United States military has to be positioned to do that. It has to be authorized to do that. And we have to begin making it clear that this increasing threat is simply intolerable.
All right, now let me ask you this. I know we've got a couple of things to cover here. The second issue is this. A judge or a jury has now decided not to convict the Libyan militant who's accused in the Benghazi terrorist attacks. He's been convicted of terrorism, but he was not convicted. He was found not guilty of murder. And what should we make of that result out of this long investigation into the Benghazi deaths?
Well, again, this is an object lesson, it seems to me, in the limitation of a criminal judicial approach to what is an act of war against us. The jihadists who attacked our facilities in Benghazi should not, in my judgment, be given the due process of our criminal justice system. They should be treated as combatants and held in places like Guantanamo Bay for the duration of the conflict.
I agree with you there, but it seems that President Trump, who also had that same position when he was on the campaign trail, has now had the most recent people who've been accused of terrorism treated as civilian criminals, hasn't he?
He has indeed, and I think this is hopefully going to be a wake-up call for him as to why that's a fraud. This, unfortunately, is just one of many examples, as we've talked about over the past few months, Lars, in which I believe the people who are surrounding this president are not aligned with his policy approach and have been giving him deficient advice, if not actually undermining his policies.
I mean, this guy was charged with 18 different counts, and he was acquitted on 14 of the 18 counts because apparently the jury bought the argument that his defense team advanced that said this was just a guy who saw some things on fire in his hometown, and like many people might do, even in America, there are people who are drawn to active fire scenes, that somehow he went to this fire scene and got caught up in it, and that he wasn't really part of the problem at all. So they found him guilty of terrorism, but not guilty of all the other charges.
Yeah, well, it's kind of amazing that they found him guilty of even that, if he was just a spectator at a firefight. But the reality is, Lars, as you know, you cannot evidentiary work that's needed when you're in a combat zone or what is tantamount to one in a dangerous place like Benghazi. So I'm surprised that anybody is surprised that you get this kind of outcome, and I think it should, as I say, be a salutary caution to proceeding in this way with the next rounds of terrorists.
I'm talking to Frank Gaffney, who's the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. Frank, you also talk about the Heritage Foundation with its brand new Index of U.S. Military Strength and how it describes the status of the American military. What's it say about us?
It's a very chilling read, Lars. I've had a chance to talk about this on our own little radio program with the editor of the book, Dakota Wood, yesterday. And what he really impressed upon me is not only what has now been observed by lots of people, which is that we have the smallest military in almost every key dimension.
Frank? You know what?
Forever.
Frank, you're dropping in and out from time to time. I'm not quite sure if it's the background noise there or not, but I just want to make sure we hear everything you say. You were saying that we've got one of the smallest militaries we've had in a long time.
Yeah, this has been widely noted, Lars. I apologize, I'm on a train. But the problem that Dakota points out, he's a Lieutenant Colonel Marine retired, is that the readiness of the forces that we have is so low that the fraction that is available for the kinds of purposes we may need them to engage in, namely war fighting, at any given moment, is trivially small. And our enemies understand that. Don Rumsfeld used to say, weakness is provocative. It is the antithesis of the philosophy that I embrace and that Ronald Reagan practiced, peace through strength. We're inviting our enemies to act aggressively against us, and I think this is something the American people need to awaken to and insist be corrected. It's what Donald Trump ran on. He needs to be implementing it now.
Hey, Frank, tell me this last issue I wanted to cover while we've got time with you. How is it that you figure that Twitter is now evolving into a kind of big brother?
Well, what Twitter has now announced in guidelines that are going into effect next month, Lars, is that they're now going to not only use your online presence on Twitter to evaluate whether they should take action against your use of their service, they're going to be evaluating your presence or activities off the Twitter accounts. And that means a kind of big brother monitoring of your activities. It probably means that they're going to be taking advice from disreputable, discredited groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, who make it their business as an instrument of political warfare to try to silence us. And that's the sort of thing that I think is moving us in a very dangerous direction in terms of freedom of speech.
How do they justify that, to say that we're going to evaluate you not just on what you do on Twitter, but what you do elsewhere on social media?
It's part of this new sort of frenzy to ensure that nobody says anything that is offensive, at least to certain classes of people. Notable among them, of course, Sharia supremacists. And if you start down that road, this is why I think the need to protect our freedom of speech, which you practice every day, my friend, is so vital. If you start making salami slices in it, you suddenly wind up with no free speech at all, and one of our most fundamental freedoms and essential to our republic is gone.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more, and if I thought it would actually do some good, like maybe take down some of the magazines where the Sharia law types are telling people how to build pressure cooker bombs or how to carry out vehicle attacks, but I imagine that those will be the things that won't be covered. Frank Gaffney is the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. Thanks very much, Frank. We appreciate your time.